But let's move on to East Africa now. We see Kenya plans to link its tax collection system to mobile financial platforms to weed out tax evaders and boost revenue by billions of shillings, part of a raft of measures to repair its coffers. Let's talk to Matt Kindigan now, practice leader, Sub-Saharan Africa, front of you. Great to have you, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show today.
So how effective will these new tax collection measures be at improving, revenues for the country?
Well, certainly it's a positive move. It will improve tax revenue for Kenya, but I would say it's probably going to be moderately successful in the short term. Often these measures to implement broader tax collection and clamp down on tax evasion and avoidance are moderately successful. There have been many examples in recent years from other African countries where the revenues generated from these measures kind of undershoot expectations. However, we certainly would expect the government to continue to pursue these measures or similar measures over the next year or so, simply because public finances are in a pretty tight position at the moment in Kenya. We're also likely to see, in particular, a broadening of the tax base, further tax hikes, as the government tries to raise revenue and stabilize public finances. And the new government under William Ruto has the political space to do this. He doesn't have to fight an election for at least another 4 years. And so he's probably going to be more likely to take difficult measures to introduce painful tax increases over the next couple of years to stabilize public finances.
And they're also looking at, cutting borrowing. At this time, how realistic is that for the economy?
Probably not very likely. The government wants to stabilize its public finances overall, but being able to cut borrowing does require tax increases. It does require spending cuts. And we do actually expect the government to fail to fulfill its spending plans for its 2022-2023 budget as it currently is planned. So if it does want to reduce borrowing, it will need to cut back on its spending ambitions. There are several double-digit increases it was planning. The government was planning for certain functions in government, including infrastructure, healthcare, education. So certainly, we would need to see much less ambitious increases to government spending and investment if the government wants to reduce its borrowing.
And obviously, all of this will impact the Kenyan shilling going forward. What are you expecting?
Yeah, so the Kenyan shilling has actually lost more value than we were previously expecting. So the shilling is trading close to 123, 124 per dollar at the moment. We were expecting the shilling to average that amount in 2023 just a few months ago. So now we are forecasting the shilling to end the year at close to 140 per dollar. And part of the reason, is that lots of emerging market currencies are facing pressure from a very strong dollar generally, rising interest rates in the US. But in Kenya's case, investors are very concerned that the fiscal situation is not yet under control. There's been quite a lot of pressure on the government to demonstrate that it will be consolidating public finances. And until this is the case, we're probably going to see pretty steady downward pressure on the shilling, more so than in other emerging markets. So certainly the next 3 to 6 months will be really important in terms of the government's demonstrating its commitment to fiscal prudence in order to ensure that the shilling remains more stable.
And looking at, sub-Saharan Africa, as a whole, how do you think, the region can cut, borrowing realistically in 2023?
Yeah, so the region does need to, governments across Africa do need to make sure that they are looking at their borrowing very carefully and reducing borrowing wherever possible, simply because debt servicing costs are rising because global interest rates are rising. So certainly there is significant pressure there. Whether or not they're going to be successful is a big question. We've seen a couple of cautionary tales recently. Ghana is effectively defaulting on its external debts. We don't necessarily see this being repeated across the region, and this is because we are going to see the IMF become quite forthcoming in providing support. But unless governments are able to introduce tax increases and very painful spending cuts, then cutting borrowing is not going to be as easy as they would like it to be. So certainly we do expect to see pressure to reduce borrowing, but we don't necessarily see it materializing as quickly as we would like.
All right, thank you so much, Matt Kenga, practice leader, Sub-Saharan Africa front of you. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.